for the first time since I was a wee boy, probably about the same height though, get to buy some more HeroScape. I've waited for this day for a long time. I'm ready to spend an irresponsible amount of money on these pre-orders. Today, I thought I would record another tier list for HeroScape.
Jackson Warfield's game room.
Let's go through the Swarm of the Marrow Master Set. So this was actually the second Master Set in the history of HeroScape. Doesn't have as many units as Rise of the Valkyrie, but it's got 10 of them, and I'm gonna give you my tier ratings for each of them now. And one thing I'm gonna preface with, because I didn't mention this in the first video, the main way that I play HeroScape, 3v3 team battles. I'm not really a tournament player myself. The reason why this is the way I play it is because the game came out when I was in high school / college, and we used to be like a stay up till 3 a.m. game I'd play with a bunch of my friends. And now the way it gets played is we kind of come together periodically and just play big games, and team games are the best way to get these games in. So that's my primary way of experiencing HeroScape. Today, we're gonna get into the Swarm of the Marrow units, starting with the Marrden Nagrubs. I'm not sure why the Marrden Nagrubs are named Marrden instead of Marro. Same with like the Marrden Hounds. I guess the four-legged Marrow get, called Marrden, I guess. The Marrden Nagrubs are A tier. And this might sound surprising because they can't do anything. Well, their main ability is to be basically food for Tor-Kul-Na and other large Marrow units. Basically, they just walk alongside him and then he just gobbles them up to get health back, which can be very useful for keeping your giants moving. But the other reason why Marrden Nagrubs are higher is because I had a friend who actually started calling his college friends Nagrubs, and they were like, what the is a Nagrub? They tried to Google it, and one guy was like, I saw this game called HeroScape, that's not it. But yeah, that was it. That's why you're called an Nagrub, buddy. So the Marrden Nagrubs are an A tier, although admittedly, if it weren't for that, I'd probably put them in more like the B tier, or maybe the C tier. Next Marrow unit, we're kind of gonna go through the Marrow first here, are the Marro Stingers. Marro Stingers are a B tier unit for me. Amongst the Marrow squads that came out, the Marro Stingers are one of my favorites because they have an upside. Now, what the Marro Stingers do is they allow you to gamble and try to get stronger attack values from them. 1 out of every 5 times you shoot with them, one of them just like goes poof. If they don't go poof, they're a really good unit. I tend to like units like that have the high upside, as if they work really well. That's why I have them as a B tier. But honestly, like there's nothing, I mean, they have like kind of cool guns. I guess there's nothing too special about them. They don't have amazingly good defense. Part of the reason why they're a B tier is also because they come with the Marro Hive, which we'll talk about in a minute, which makes the going poof of the Marro Stingers be less painful. Next up, we have the Marro Hive. The Marro Hive is the only unit in HeroScape that can actually move, and it's a large 6-hex hive, and it does 2 things. One, it allows you to control any Marrow unit near it by placing your order markers on it, which means if you want to when you activate the Marro Hive, you can actually activate units near it, which is kind of cool. It's a hive mind. And it can also regenerate fallen units, such as the Marro Stingers we just talked about that go poof occasionally because I guess their guns backfire. The Marro Hive, purely because of how interesting of a unit it is and how it pretty much actually defines like the Marrow army, which isn't really a thing in HeroScape of armies having these like really strong personalities. It's an A tier for me. It's not particularly strong. You can't hide it. It's a giant thing on the table, but it's an A tier unit for me. There's no way it was going to become S tier unless it were something like you control all the Marrow units on the board. But yeah, the Marro Hive, if you're playing Marrow, it's a really fun unit to play with. It's a cool idea, and I hope the new HeroScape has more units that are kind of like this, that can really kind of set the personality of the factions. Next up is Tor-Kul-Na. Tor-Kul-Na, like Negoksa, is named in this interesting Marrow-like way where he has 3 syllables, 3 somewhat random syllables strung together. Tor-Kul-Na was actually mentioned in, I think it was Thormund's journal, as it was described as being this giant Marrow thing stomping down, and it was probably it's the poster unit of the Swarm of the Marrow Master Set. Tor-Kul-Na is an expensive unit, 220 points, but it can stomp anything that's in its way. I mean, that's a cool ability, and it's got a little guy riding on, it's a giant with a little dude riding the giant. I guess there's a question of whether or not Tor-Kul-Na is the little Marrow guy riding on the shoulders of the giant, or whether it's the giant itself, and that rider is like a disposable Marrow unit, or Marrow character that just gets, occasionally accidentally stomped on, or maybe eats it. I don't know. But Tor-Kul-Na is also an A tier. It's a centerpiece unit for your army, and actually because it can work with, for example, the Marrden Nagrubs to get some extra health going, it actually is pretty hardy. So it didn't need to have a huge health number to be able to survive some hits on the battlefield, because like it's going to be a target. Everyone knows that's playing against an army is going to know that Tor-Kul-Na is going to be one of the bigger ones you have to take out. I was supposed to talk about this one earlier, but messed up the order here, about the Marro Drudge. So the Marro Drudge are the other regular Marrow common squad that came in the Swarm of the Marrow Master set along with the Marro Stingers. I prefer the Marro Stingers. I have the Marro Drudge as a C tier unit. The Marro Drudge, kind of a gimmicky unit because they're meant to go with Swamp Water, which was another type of terrain that was released with the Swarm of the Marrow Master set. They're not particularly strong. They have a base attack of 2, but when they're in a swamp space, they bring their attack up to 3, and then they can actually do swamp tunneling, so they can move around a little bit more when they're in the swamp. If you're building HeroScape Mac, I find it's more fun to try and build out other terrain types, to be honest. I mean, like, there's fun terrain in HeroScape and there's not fun terrain. Fun terrain, for example, for me would be lava, because you can have, you go in lava, you almost always die. Lava's pretty fun. Swamp and water are kind of boring, and for pretty much every other unit in the game, swamp and water are exactly the same. The Marro Drudge became an easily forgotten unit, and again, I usually would pick the Marro Stingers over them if you have to choose. And that's it for the Marro today. The Marro are a very interesting theme in HeroScape because they're kind of based on, I guess, some Warhammer units like the Bone Reapers, or originally, I guess, the Tomb Kings, but also kind of the Necrons in a way. They do regenerate. I actually play Necrons. Moving on to the non-Marro units, though, we have first Shiori, the Einar Ninja. So for whatever reason, I guess every general, every major faction in HeroScape has their own ninja, interestingly enough. I don't quite understand why. Shiori may be one of the more boring ninjas in the game. Shiori isn't like Isamu, where Isamu is like 10 points and you can stick Isamu in any army. Shiori I actually had to look up because I did not remember what Shiori actually did. And Shiori being like a 60-point unit, not an amazingly great deal for what she does. It was just very, honestly, probably the most forgettable unit. I actually forgot that Shiori was in the Swarm of the Marrow Master set. If I did like a Sporkle quiz for this before I compiled the list and started doing this, I would not have gotten Shiori. And as a result of that, Shiori probably at combat is a C tier, but I'm going to put Shiori in the D tier just because very forgettable ninja. So sorry, Shiori, you're a D tier unit. I'm probably not going to pick you in any of my armies. Not a forgotten unit of the Swarm of the Marrow Master set is Major Q10. So Major Q10 is supposedly, I guess, the more intelligent version of, maybe less extreme version of Major Q9, which came out in an earlier expansion, which we'll definitely be doing a tier list with Major Q9. Major Q10 is a C tier unit. Close to B tier, probably upper C tier, but still a C tier, just because Major Q10 just really doesn't have anything special that it brings to the table. It's got the wrist rocket special attack, so it's got an attack where you get multiple shots in, but it's not particularly strong. Defensively, it's fine. He's got 5 defense and 5 life. It doesn't even really fit like the Soulborg theming where you have like a ton of defense and not that much life. It's almost like they saw that people were annoyed with Deathwalker 9000 with only 1 life. And 150 points is also a little bit of a pricey unit. I just don't find myself picking Major Q10 very often. I would actually have Major Q10 as being the lowest of the majors of the Soulborgs, and that might be controversial because Major X17 I think has been graded pretty lowly in some circles, but yeah, Major Q10 for me is a C tier. It's unfortunate because I really like Major Q9, and that's the Soulborg theme, especially the Vidar Soulborgs are one of my favorite, arguably my favorite category of units in HeroScape. So I feel bad. Next is the token Ular unit of Swarm of the Marrow. It's Sonlen, the elf. Sonlen is an S tier unit. Sonlen with the dragon swoop, and dragon healing, and the fact that you can attack with the dragon and attack with Sonlen, and the fact that it's like a nice introduction of elf theming into the game, which could have been done a little bit faster. Could have had, actually, elves are fine. They really needed more dwarves for a lot of the early phases of the game. Sonlen's an S tier unit. 160 points is like pretty pricey, but with 6 life actually will last a long time, and with the dragon healing can actually do a lot of things. One of the things that HeroScape does to make it very playable is you don't have really long turns with any unit. It's different than, like, say, Warhammer that way. But Sonlen, because of that, Sonlen, the fact that you can do 3 things in every turn. You can do dragon healing, then after you move, and you do your dragon swoop, and then your normal attack. It's a pretty fun unit to play with, especially with only being 1 model. Easily the strongest elf character in the game, in my opinion. So Sonlen is an S tier. 2 units to go. You may know what those are. We've talked about them before. Next we have Raelin the Kyrie warrior, specifically, obviously the version of Raelin that came with the Swarm of the Marrow Master set. In retrospect, I don't know that Raelin required a new model when it came out in the Swarm of the Marrow Master set. If they wanted to do a new card for Raelin, that's fine. Maybe that would have been cool if they included a bunch of cards for existing units as alternative ways to play them. I don't know why a new model was necessary. That kind of takes up space in the box that could have been used for another completely new model. Maybe this could have been a different Kyrie. Raelin, the Kyrie warrior in the Swarm of the Marrow version, has a little bit of a weaker defense aura than Raelin did in the Rise of the Valkyrie Master set. It has a larger range for a defensive aura. It has 6 spaces instead of 4, but it only adds 1 to your defense dice instead of 2. This Raelin has a nice attack boost, but if you're using Raelin, you're probably not putting Raelin on the front lines. It's more like a last-ditch kind of ability. Raelin for the Swarm of the Marrow Master set is a C tier unit, just because it's so much weaker than the Raelin for Rise of the Valkyrie. And 120 points too. It's not like it got a lot cheaper anyway. I rarely liked. If I have the choice, I'm almost never going to go with this Raelin. So, unfortunately, it's a C tier. Maybe it could have been a little bit higher if it weren't Raelin. If it were someone else, maybe if it were a new character, maybe I'd feel a little bit more positive about her. But yeah, that's too bad. Another C tier unit. There are a lot of C's in Swarm of the Marrow. And lastly, we have Sergeant Drake Alexander for Swarm of the Marrow. Now again, Sergeant Drake already exists. I decided to make another sculpt for Sergeant Drake Alexander instead of making another soldier. I can tell what they might have been going for, of trying to have some continuity of like, these are like the protagonist characters in this universe, but it's not like it was a campaign type game. Like, I don't think anyone was getting that attached to these individual characters, especially because there wasn't like another, I don't know, like a legit show to go along with it or anything like that.
Will you fight? Take down bad guys? Yeah, I can handle that.
Sergeant Drake Alexander is a B tier. Sergeant Drake is almost the same character in many ways as the original Sergeant Drake Alexander. He's got the Thorian speed, so you can't hit him from range. He's got the grapple arm, so he can kind of shoot up and encourage you to build maps that are really tall, just to give, just to give the grapple arm something to do, I guess. The pistol special fire attack is interesting because it can be used to attack enemies that follow Jandar. I mean, maybe with the master set here, they were trying to make more personality for factions, whereas Drake, you wouldn't want to pair him with the guys to fight any Jandar units. I mean, he could be on the Jandar team, but that just gives him like a weakness that your opponent can exploit. Actually, screw it. This version of Sergeant Drake Alexander is a C tier unit. It's just a weird version. I don't know why they did this, but I mean, it's a fine enough unit, but really should have been a new unit in my opinion. So yeah, this is the slightly more expensive version of Sergeant Drake, so it comes down to the C tier. So that's it for today's list. Basically, HeroScape, a bunch of C tier units except for Sonlen. Hope you enjoyed today's video. I'm going to be doing more HeroScape tier lists, probably wanting to do every unit eventually, so you can look forward to that. Until next time, this is Jackson Warfield's Game Room.